When we come back, I'll show you the ergonomic thinking involved in changing tools to make them perfect for your garden. Along with the pleasure in growing food and eating it, I always like to find better ways of doing what I'm doing in the garden. This is a standard planting hoe. Use it to make a furrow and put the seeds in. But I'm always looking for neater ways to do things. So I use a board sometimes. Just take the edge of it, make a furrow, makes a very nice furrow, sprinkle the seeds in, and I have to put the soil back in over it. Works well, but whenever you find something that works, there's always a better way. So I keep looking around. Went back to the shop and I thought, I'm going to create a tool that does both, makes the furrow and puts the soil back over. So I created the earth zipper out of some used parts. This is an old broken handle. This is a copper plumbing elbow. I took a hacksaw, cut it open, some pliers, and bent it into shape, and I soldered it on the end here. And the idea is that I can draw it through the soil and make a furrow, and then turn it over after I sprinkle the seeds in, and draw it back over and close the furrow up and bury the seeds. Well, again, once you find a solution, keep thinking. You're not there yet. There's another one. I had to use a soldering iron on that, and that's complicated. So I went back to the hardware store, looked around, and I found this little stainless steel towel hook for the bathroom. Again, put it in a vise, took my hacksaw and cut it away, put in a simple wire handle, and now I have one that actually works even better. Draws a nice furrow to put the seed in, sprinkle in the seed, turn it over, and it pulls the soil right back over. Now, this sort of innovation is great for all of us, but especially for people with handicaps or special needs. They may want to make special tools that allow them to do their gardening easier. So whether you've seen it or not, whether it's made now or not, don't let that stop you. Imagine it, make it, and try it out. I'm fascinated with finding garden tools that do the job well and are pleasant for me to use. And at the start of the season, when I'm ready to put in transplants, I reach for a trowel and I start to dig a hole. But right off I notice that that's a strain on my wrist. With the problems of carpal tunnel syndrome and everything today, people are worried about straining their wrist like this. So is there a solution? What if I turn this around? What if I hold it like a dagger? Then there's no strain on my wrist. I can poke it into the soil, make a hole for the transplant. But this trowel is a little long for that job. So I went to the hardware store, got a bricklayer's trowel, cut off the tip, bent the handle back, and made a nice small-scale dagger trowel. No strain on my wrist, makes just the right size hole to put in my seedling. There's a commercial model available that does something else. It puts the handle of the trowel at a right angle like that. So basically I'm holding it just as comfortably, no real stress, pulling to make the hole, putting the seedling in. All three tools do the same job, but these two without stressing a part of my body. Once my seedlings are in there, I want to cultivate them. And a lot of people like these sort of toothed cultivators. You can drag them through the soil and get rid of weeds. But there is one thing to think about with them. They have teeth, and the tendency with a toothed cultivator like this is to push it into the soil just a little too deeply. And if I go close to my seedlings, once they have roots out into the soil, I'm killing their roots. And some of the most important feeder roots are right there in the surface of the soil. So tools like this, although they'll get rid of weeds, may not be the best answer if you want to keep your seedlings growing as well as possible. So let's look into another type of cultivator, one that will skim the surface of the soil. Well, this intends to do that, but unfortunately the blade has been put on at a right angle. I have to chop with it rather than skim. Now this one's better because the blade has been put on at a nice angle that allows me to draw it through the soil and just get rid of weeds without going down and harming any of the roots of my seedling. But this is designed a little more heavily than I like. It's almost an axe rather than a razor, as if I were trying to get rid of a big weed and now we're going to chop it out with this. There's a lot of weight there. I prefer a tool that's been designed to take even more stress off my hand and arm. There's some weight here, but there's a counterweight back here. So this tool balances very nicely on my hand and is not dragging down my wrist. This one drags down my wrist, as you can see, if I try and balance it on my hand. This one also allows me to skim very nicely around the plant. For narrower rows, I just cut the blade down. Also, fabricated another design, no real difference, but again, I can come in narrower spaces. And since I play around, I put a right handle on this one so I can reach out there with it. Does it work better? Well, no, it's a little too far from what I want to do, but it's the type of thinking that will lead you into finding tools that'll really do the job well for you. Here's another model called a Cape Cod hoe. Allows you to hold your wrist comfortably and go side to side. Unfortunately, it tends to pile up the soil, not as effective as these other tools. Now, if you do get some big weeds out there, you're going to want to pry them out. And here are a couple of tools that'll do that. This is the standard asparagus knife. You can poke that in and cut off the root of a deep-rooted weed and pry it out. What I really prefer is this small hand fork. It goes in nicely, pushes in easily, and allows me to really pry and get the whole root system of a larger root out. Not hard on you, effective in the garden. That's the best type of tool to have. With Barbara's help, let me show you some more examples.
Elliot and I are different sizes. He's about 5 inches taller than I am, so our draw hoes are made in different sizes.
If we were to exchange tools, the long handle on mine would be awkward for Barbara, and this wouldn't allow me to use it as easily as I normally do.
The ideal height for a draw hoe is just so that it comes to the tip of your nose. So this is just about right.
Now, if you're going to use a chopping hoe like this with the 90-degree blade, you actually want a shorter handle because you're using it more like a mattock, and a long handle would be very awkward. Another popular hoe style is a push-pull hoe, also called the Dutch hoe. And this, you push back and forth in the soil, and it cuts on both blades. I don't use this. I don't think it's as accurate in between rows of vegetables as it could be, but Barbara has one she likes.
This is a modification of the same hoe that Elliot made for me to use in flower gardens, because very often I have to reach way in. So this has a very lightweight handle and a pistol grip here, so that I can actually use this with one hand, even left-handed, and I can reach right in among clumps in a perennial garden, an annual garden. I just love to work with it.
Now, my favorite scuffle hoe is this stirrup hoe that has this action back and forth. It really cuts well with both blades. I don't use it in the soft garden soil because I find a tool like this tends to go too deeply, but it's ideal in the hard path. Keeping weeds out of here, you couldn't have a better tool. Now, if you want to keep your garden soil fluffy, you can take a fork, push it into the soil, rock back on the handle, and you've done the job.
Now, there's actually another tool that's designed to just do that job. It's called a broad fork.
Now, with this design, with the handles here, you notice that when Barbara uses it, she actually has to move her body back to get out of the way, an extra action. This tool is basically the same tool, does the same job, but it has two handles. So after you push it into the ground, you can move your hands behind you, and it's a much more comfortable and efficient tool to use. Some tools can be well designed and still not work well. This furrowing hoe really has a nice curve to it. You can tell from the fact that it's rusty, it doesn't get used much. And if I were to want to make a furrow to plant potatoes, this is the tool I would most likely use. And I don't need that much of a furrow to put potatoes in. There's a lot easier way to do it.
It's this simple bulb planter. When I plant potatoes, all I do is put the bulb planter in the soil, the depth of the planter, drop in a potato, knock out the soil, make another one a foot down the row, and on. Simplicity itself.
The right tool makes any garden job easier. We've shown you lots of different tools, and now it's time to play a fun little game. What would I do if I were limited to just 3 tools? I'd have to think long and hard, and I'd want to make sure they were good ones. I suspect my first choice would be this strapped manure fork. I could make compost, I could spread compost, I could mix it into the soil, and I could also poke the fork into the soil and do some light loosening of it. That would probably be the first choice. Second choice would be a really nice garden rake like this, but one that's 30 inches wide, because I garden in 30-inch wide beds, and I'd want to get them just as smooth as possible to have a perfect seed bed to put my seeds and little plants into. And my third choice would obviously be a hoe. I could use the edge of it to make a furrow, and then I could use it from then on cultivating alongside and around my plants to keep the garden weed-free. That would just about do it, I think. What would your choice of 3 tools, Barbara?
Well, for landscaping and flower gardening, I guess the ones I'd pick, I'd start with a good sturdy trowel for weeding. I'd have to have something like that. I need something to dig with. So I'd probably take a round point shovel with a long handle for digging holes and also moving earth or stones from one place to another. I'd need a good rake. I'd take an iron rake because I could use it as a lawn rake if I had to, but I need things for smoothing, raking out debris, and grading. And then I'd have to have 4, Elliot.
Uh-oh.
So I can't garden without my good pruners. I carry around and use constantly. So I gotta have 4.
Well, now if you get 4, I want to add in, let's see, I need to have a spade. I want to have a small transplanting trowel.
No, but we're out of time. So for now, goodbye and good gardening.
Next on TLC, get started on easy home projects that anyone can handle here on Homebodies. Then indulge your creative side with Debbie Stapley on Crafts & Company here on TLC.